Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy my new stories every day. The sound of my wife's key in the door barely stirred me as I sat in the living room, the only light coming from the muted glow of the TV. A sitcom rerun was playing, but I hadn't paid attention to a single line. Instead, my eyes were fixed on the digital clock on the wall, watching the minutes tick by, each one chipping away at my patience. 10:47 p.m. She'd said she'd be home by 9. "Hey, honey," she said, breezing in with a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. She shrugged off her coat, hung it by the door, and brushed her hair back. She looked refreshed, like someone who just had a long chat over wine and laughter, not like someone coming home from a late business meeting. "Sorry, it ran over. And traffic was brutal." The explanation was so automatic it barely registered with her, like she'd rehearsed it. I tried to read her, to look for a sign of something deeper, but she just looked tired, maybe even annoyed that I'd waited up for her. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to be the kind of husband who believed her without question. But then, there was that text. Earlier, around dinner time, she'd left her phone charging on the counter, something she rarely did. I noticed a few notifications lighting up the screen while I cleaned up from dinner with the kids. I ignored the first few texts, but then I saw one that caught my eye: "See you tonight, gorgeous." My heart went cold, but I kept my face straight. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a message meant for someone else, a wrong number, something easily explained. But as I washed dishes, that line replayed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't paranoia, not this time. We'd been together too long for me to be paranoid. No, this was something different. I could feel it in my gut. "So, how was the meeting?" I asked, doing my best to sound casual. She froze, just for a fraction of a second, but long enough for me to catch it. Her eyes darted to the side, and her mouth opened slightly before she finally answered, "Oh, it was fine. We're just working on finalizing the new campaign, and everyone's got their own ideas." I nodded, as if that answered everything. But a part of me already knew there wouldn't be any real answers tonight. Instead, I stood, stretched, and gathered my things, heading toward the stairs. "I'm going to turn in," I said, giving her a brief smile, though I felt anything but at ease. "Good night." "Night," she replied, but her eyes lingered on me, as if she was assessing how much I'd believed her story. She seemed relieved when I didn't press for more. In bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her lie settling over me like a blanket. I felt stupid for even suspecting, stupid for not confronting her immediately. But what if I was wrong? What if there really was an explanation? The idea seemed flimsy, though. A message like that, and her reaction tonight, spoke volumes. I wasn't the kind of man who liked jumping to conclusions, but I wasn't about to pretend that everything was fine either. The next day, I acted like nothing had happened. We went through our morning routine with the kids, her chatting about the day ahead as if it were any other morning. It was strange, watching her move through our kitchen, acting so normal, so familiar, while I saw her in a whole new light. I went to work with my mind running in circles, torn between anger and confusion. I wanted answers, but I didn't want to ask. Not yet. In the quiet moments of my workday, I found myself replaying every suspicious moment I could remember, every missed dinner, every unexplained late night. They were stacking up in my head like stones, each one adding weight to the pit in my stomach. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, I told myself. Maybe this was all some wild misunderstanding. But as I thought more about it, the nagging doubt wouldn't leave me. That night, I checked her phone while she was in the shower, my heart racing like a kid sneaking out after curfew. I scrolled through her recent messages, hands shaking, expecting to find. I don't know, maybe something to prove me wrong. But her chat history was suspiciously clean, too clean. Only work contacts, the group chat with her friends, and our own messages. But there were a few gaps in her call log, times she'd called a number I didn't recognize, then deleted it. I felt a sting of anger, a flare of betrayal that was almost too much to bear. As she stepped out of the shower, I quickly set her phone back in place and tried to act natural, busying myself with something on my own screen. But that night, I couldn't keep quiet. "Have you been texting anyone, outside of work?" I asked casually as we got into bed. She paused, looking at me as if trying to read my face. "Why would you ask that?" she replied, a little too quickly. "Just wondering. I saw a few missed calls on your phone. Didn't recognize the number." I waited, watching her reaction. She laughed, but it was forced. "Probably just spam. You know how these telemarketers are these days." I didn't press her. Instead, I just nodded and turned off my bedside lamp, lying in the dark with my eyes open, feeling the space between us in a way I never had before. If I was right, if there was something going on, I needed proof. Something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away with half-hearted lies. The days that followed were tense. I started paying closer attention to her routine, listening for any inconsistency, anything that might give her away. And she was different, too, acting more cautious around me, but there was a carelessness to it, as though she thought I wouldn't notice. She was wrong. On Friday night, she said she had a late meeting again. This time, I stayed quiet, just nodding and watching her leave, wondering if she would sense my suspicion, but she didn't. Instead, she walked out the door with that same practiced ease. It was infuriating, watching her act so confident, so assured that I wouldn't figure it out. As soon as she was out of sight, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I wasn't entirely sure what I'd do, but I couldn't sit around anymore, waiting for her to come back with another story. I drove around for a bit, my thoughts racing, my hands gripping the wheel tight. I told myself I wouldn't go full detective, wouldn't resort to stalking or snooping. But my patience had run out. Finally, I parked near her office building and waited. I was prepared for anything, an excuse, a confrontation, even just watching her walk out and maybe catching a glimpse of what she was really up to. I told myself I was doing this to get peace of mind, to finally put my suspicions to rest, one way or another. After about an hour, I saw her walk out, but she wasn't alone. There was a man beside her, someone I'd never seen before. They were laughing, their heads bent close together, and it wasn't the kind of body language you'd expect from colleagues. They lingered outside, talking, laughing, close enough that it made me feel sick. There it was, my proof, in the form of a stranger standing too close to my wife. I drove back home in a daze, my thoughts an incoherent mess. My suspicion was confirmed, and yet it didn't feel real. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many times she'd lied to me, laughed with him, spent time with him while I was home with the kids, believing in her, trusting her. I felt a raw anger bubbling inside me, and I knew I had to confront her, but I wanted to do it right. I wanted to be calm, composed, and in control. I'd never thought of myself as the kind of man who would consider revenge, but as I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, her lies and deceit replaying in my mind, I realized I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted her to understand the weight of her betrayal. The next morning, the usual sounds of our weekend routine felt surreal. The kids were already up, filling the house with chatter and laughter, while the smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. But I was operating on autopilot, forcing myself through the motions, every word and smile feeling like an act. She was there, flipping pancakes at the stove, humming softly as if last night had been nothing but a normal day. I watched her for a moment, the way she moved around the kitchen, so casual, so comfortable. A part of me wanted to call her out right then, to ask her how she could stand there like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't lied to my face and betrayed everything we'd built. But the kids were right there. I forced myself to keep quiet, swallowing my anger with each bite of breakfast. I told myself I needed to handle this carefully, not just for me but for them. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly, giving me a curious look as I stared blankly at my plate. "Yeah," I said, snapping back to reality. "Just tired. Work's been hectic lately." She nodded, looking relieved, and turned back to the stove. I watched her, feeling the distance between us growing wider with each second. This woman, this stranger in my kitchen, who had somehow replaced the woman I thought I knew. She was right here, but it was like she was miles away. Later that afternoon, when the kids were playing in the yard, she came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, her face pressed against my back. Her touch, once comforting and familiar, felt cold. I stiffened, my mind flashing back to the man I'd seen her with the night before, laughing together, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "You seem so distant," she murmured. "Are we, okay?" The irony of her question hit me like a punch. Here she was, pretending to care about the distance she'd created, playing the role of the concerned wife. I wanted to turn around, to ask her how she could lie to me like this, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Not yet," I told myself. This wasn't the moment. "Just a lot on my mind," I replied, gently peeling her arms off me. "Work, the house, you know how it is." She gave me a long look, searching my face for something. Maybe she sensed it, the shift in my attitude, or maybe she was just nervous. Either way, she didn't press the issue. Instead, she nodded, offering me a small, understanding smile before retreating into the house. As soon as she was gone, I felt a wave of relief. I needed space, a moment to breathe, to clear my head before I did something I couldn't take back. Over the next few days, I replayed the scene I'd witnessed outside her office, trying to make sense of it. I combed through the small moments, the missed calls, the late nights, and it all started to fit together in a way that was undeniable. She was lying to me, living a double life right under my nose, and I'd been too blind to see it. One night, as she was putting the kids to bed, I decided to take things into my own hands. I went into her office, opened her laptop, and searched for anything that might give me more insight. At first, everything seemed normal, her emails, her calendar, her notes. But then I stumbled upon a folder, hidden among work files, labeled simply Photos. With a shaky hand, I opened it. At first, it was just pictures from family vacations, the kids at the beach, photos of us laughing together at some birthday party. But as I scrolled further, the photos changed. There were pictures of her with him, the same man I'd seen her with outside her office. They were at restaurants, bars, places she'd claimed to be for work. In one photo, they were sitting on a park bench, her head resting on his shoulder, their faces close, intimate. I felt a sickening wave of anger rise in my chest. This wasn't just a passing fling, she was sharing parts of her life with him, parts she'd once shared with me. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, my mind racing with thoughts I could barely contain. The next day, I called a lawyer. The conversation was short. He asked a few questions about our assets, about custody, about how long I thought this had been going on. I answered in a daze, barely processing his words. When he asked if I was ready to proceed, I hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision. But then I remembered the photos, the laughter she'd shared with him, the lies she'd told me, and I knew there was no going back. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm ready." That night, I sat down and wrote her a note. Nothing long, nothing emotional. Just a simple statement, "We need to talk tonight." I placed it on the kitchen counter where she'd be sure to see it in the morning, knowing that it would give her something to think about, to worry over. The day passed slowly, the tension in the house thick and suffocating. She moved through the day in a kind of quiet anticipation, glancing at me now and then, as if she was trying to gauge my mood, to figure out what I wanted to talk about. I kept my expression neutral, biding my time, letting the silence work its way under her skin. When the kids were finally in bed, she came into the living room, looking more anxious than I'd ever seen her. She sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes darting between me and the floor. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and looked her straight in the eye. "I know about him." Her face went pale. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. Then she swallowed, her lips pressing together in a tight line. What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice low, controlled. "I've seen the pictures. I know about the texts. I know you've been lying to me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her eyes filling with something like panic. For the first time, she looked truly shaken, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of the truth. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never meant for it to get this far. It was just." "Don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I don't want your excuses. I just want the truth." She looked down, her shoulders slumping, as if the weight of her deception had finally caught up to her. "It started a few months ago. I don't even know how it happened, it just did. I felt lost, I guess. And he was there." I listened in silence, my anger simmering just below the surface as she stumbled through her confession. She tried to explain, to justify, to make me understand, but every word felt hollow, like she was only telling me what she thought I wanted to hear. When she finally finished, I looked at her, the woman I'd once loved, the mother of my children, and felt nothing but disgust. "This marriage is over," I said, my voice steady. "I'll take care of the kids, the house. You can leave, or I can. I don't care which. But this," I gestured between us, "this is done." She looked at me, her eyes wide, pleading, but I held firm, my resolve unshaken. I wasn't about to be swayed by her tears, by her promises, by the empty words that had once held so much meaning. For the first time, I felt a sense of control, a sense of power over the situation. She could cry, she could beg, she could try to explain herself all she wanted, but I was done. The life we'd built, the trust we'd shared, the love I'd once believed in, it was all a lie. And I was ready to walk away from it, to start fresh, to rebuild my life without her. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. The morning after I ended things was eerily quiet. She was up early, moving around the house softly, packing a small suitcase while the kids were still asleep. I lay in bed, listening to the muffled sounds of her moving from room to room, and felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The reality was setting in, this was it. She was leaving, and we would never be the same family again. I got up and went to the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, trying to clear the fog of last night's confrontation from my mind. When she finally came in, her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe to try once more to talk me out of it, but I held up a hand, stopping her before she could start. "I think it's best if we don't drag this out," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The kids don't need to see any of this." She nodded, biting her lip as she looked down at the floor. "You're right," she whispered. "I'll go stay with my sister for now. We can figure out the details later." "Good." I took a sip of my coffee, staring out the window, unable to look at her any longer. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could undo the damage she'd done. I didn't want apologies or explanations. I just wanted her gone. As she turned to leave, she hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder. "Please tell the kids, I'll come back to explain everything soon. Just tell them it's work-related, for now." I barely nodded, keeping my eyes fixed on the empty street outside. After a moment, I heard her footsteps retreating, the door closing softly behind her. I let out a long breath, feeling the weight of the past few months lift, leaving behind a strange, hollow sensation. I spent the rest of the morning in a daze, going through the motions, getting the kids up and ready, fixing breakfast, trying to keep things as normal as possible. When they finally noticed her absence, I told them a vague story about a last-minute work trip. They accepted it, too busy with their usual weekend plans to question it further. Once the kids were occupied, I went to my office and pulled out the divorce paperwork the lawyer had emailed me. I sat there for hours, reading through the terms, thinking about what life would look like moving forward. I felt numb, detached, like I was reading about someone else's life, someone else's marriage falling apart. The words on the page felt surreal, almost meaningless, and yet they were the beginning of something real, something permanent. By the time the kids were in bed that night, I'd signed the paperwork. I left the papers on the kitchen table, ready to send off in the morning. It was done. I'd taken the first step toward freedom, toward rebuilding my life on my terms. But as the days went on, I realized that freedom wasn't as simple as signing a few papers. Every corner of the house held memories, reminders of the life we'd shared, of the family we'd built together. The laughter in the living room, the birthday parties, the quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and conversation, all of it haunted me, lingering in the silence of the empty rooms. One evening, as I was cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon an old photo album, buried beneath a pile of boxes. I flipped through the pages, seeing the years of our life together flash by in snapshots, vacations, holidays, the kids' first days of school. I found myself smiling despite everything, feeling a pang of sadness for the good times, for the life that felt so distant now. But as I closed the album, I reminded myself of the lies, the betrayal. This wasn't the life I'd signed up for. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my years holding on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. I had a new life to build, one that didn't include her. I threw myself into work, into taking care of the kids, into anything that kept me moving forward. I began to set new routines, new rhythms, small changes that helped me feel in control again. I got up earlier, started running in the mornings, finding solace in the quiet streets before dawn. I made dinner every night, tried new recipes, turned the kitchen into a place that was mine, a place where I could create something fresh, something that wasn't tainted by the past. The kids started to notice the changes too. At first, they asked when she was coming back, if things would go back to the way they were. I answered as best as I could, keeping things simple, assuring them that everything would be okay. Over time, they stopped asking, settling into our new normal, our new life. It was just the three of us now, and somehow, that felt right. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I found myself scrolling through an old message thread with her, reading through the texts we'd exchanged in the early years of our relationship. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to strangers. We'd been so happy once, so sure of each other. But now, all those promises, all those plans, felt like empty words. I deleted the thread, my finger lingering over the delete button, feeling a strange sense of finality. It was just one small step, one tiny act, but it felt like a release, a letting go of something that had no place in my life anymore. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop, someone I hadn't seen since college. We caught up, talked about life, about the past, about everything we'd lost and gained over the years. I told him about the divorce, about the betrayal, about how I was trying to rebuild, to move on. He looked at me with a kind of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the weight I was carrying. "You'll get through this," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Just take it one day at a time." I nodded, grateful for his words, for the reminder that I wasn't alone in this, that others had walked this path before me and come out stronger. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to take it one day at a time, to face each challenge, each memory, each lingering doubt, and let it go, piece by piece. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my empty house, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of hope, of possibility. The life I'd known was gone, shattered by lies and betrayal, but in its place, something new was beginning to take shape. I wasn't sure what the future held, or where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to find out. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again, though a different kind of normal. The kids and I had settled into our routines, filling our days with laughter, small adventures, and the quiet comfort of just being together. I'd even started dating here and there, feeling cautiously optimistic about a fresh start. I was finally at peace, or so I thought. One evening, after getting the kids to bed, I settled into my armchair with a book, enjoying the silence. I'd long since cleaned out any traces of her from the house, packed up her belongings, painted over the walls she'd chosen, rearranged the furniture. But just as I was about to start reading, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered. "Hello." A voice, soft and unmistakable, greeted me. "Hi, it's me." My heart dropped, and I gripped the phone tighter, fighting the surge of anger and bitterness that rose up. "What do you want?" I replied, my voice cold. She took a shaky breath. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But there's something I need to tell you." I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. "Tell me what?" I said, my patience thin. She paused, the silence stretching on until I was about to hang up, and then she said, "It wasn't what you thought, what you saw. That man, it wasn't an affair." I let out a bitter laugh. "I don't need to hear any more lies. I saw the pictures. You don't need to explain yourself." But she was persistent, her voice filled with a desperation I'd never heard before. "Please, just let me explain. It'll make sense if you let me tell you." Against my better judgment, I found myself listening, my curiosity momentarily overpowering my anger. "Fine. You've got 2 minutes." She took a deep breath and then, in a voice thick with emotion, she began. "The man you saw me with, his name is Paul. He's your half-brother." I stared at the wall, frozen, as her words sank in. "What?" "It's true," she said, her voice trembling. "I found out about him last year. Your father had a child with another woman before you were born, but he never told you. Paul reached out to me first, said he'd been looking for his family for years. He was afraid to come directly to you, afraid you wouldn't believe him. I didn't know how to bring it up to you." My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. My father? A half-brother? None of this made sense. "And you didn't think to tell me? You just decided to meet him behind my back." Her voice was choked. I tried, but every time I thought I'd found the right moment, I couldn't. "I didn't know how to tell you something like that, not after everything we'd been through. I thought I could figure it out on my own first, see if it was even true." "So you hid it," I said, the bitterness seeping back into my voice. "You hid the truth from me and let me think you were cheating." "I know, and I'm sorry," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I know I should have told you, should have been honest from the beginning. But by the time I realized how it looked, it was too late." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, anger, disbelief, even a flicker of guilt. Had I really misread the entire situation? Had I thrown away my marriage over a lie I'd told myself? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Because I had to. I needed you to know the truth. I couldn't go on without at least trying to fix this." Her voice softened. "And because he's still out there, waiting to meet you." I sat there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to my ear as her words settled in. She stayed quiet, giving me time, as if she knew how much I was struggling to process this. A half-brother. Someone I'd never known, a part of my family I'd never even imagined. And all the while, I'd been convinced she betrayed me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Where is he?" "I can give you his number. He wants to meet you, has wanted to for years. And he's been going through this alone, just as confused and lost as you are. He only wanted a chance to know his family." For a long moment, I didn't say anything, my mind racing as I tried to grasp the enormity of what she'd told me. It felt surreal, like some strange twist in a story I hadn't been prepared for. "Send me his number," I said finally, my voice hollow. I'll think about it." We hung up, and I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to believe her, to accept this new truth, but another part, the wounded part, still clung to the resentment and anger I'd held for so long. Could it really have been that simple? Could my life, my entire marriage, have unraveled over a misunderstanding? When her message came through with his number, I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to delete it, to put the past behind me and move on. But something deeper urged me to press forward, to take the chance and see where this new path might lead. After a few deep breaths, I tapped the number, pressing "call" before I could change my mind. The phone rang, once, twice, and then a man's voice answered. "Hello. Paul," I said, my voice catching. "This is. I'm your brother." A pause. And then, his voice softened. "I was hoping you'd call." We met the next day, at a small cafe near my house. I didn't know what to expect. My mind raced with questions, doubts, the lingering weight of betrayal and lost years. But when he walked in, I felt an instant recognition, an unspoken connection that needed no explanation. We talked for hours. He told me about his life, about his search for family, for answers. He told me how he'd found our father's name by chance, how he'd reached out to my wife in a desperate bid to understand where he came from. As I listened, a part of me that had felt hollow for so long finally felt full, like I'd found a piece of myself I hadn't even known was missing. By the time we left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of peace. I still didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I'd lost a marriage, a life I'd once cherished, but I'd gained something new, something unexpected, something worth holding on to. And as I walked home that night, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I knew I was finally ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever came next.